Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 92 of Reaction Time Podcast.
Reaction Time Podcast, baby.
Okay, baby.
Yeah.
Craig's calling people baby now. On purpose, I guess.
Baby.
Today, we are talking about the movie Heretic from A24.
Yep.
Starring Hugh Grant and two ladies.
Yeah. Have they ever been
Whose
anything
names
else?
I don't know. Dude, I don't know. Probably. Let's see. Their
Maybe.
names are Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. And yeah, they've got some stuff, but it's all like stuff you've never
Random
heard
things.
of. I think they're kind of in the independent field of
Yeah.
things. So,
Yeah, directed by A24, which, as we all know, is very hit or miss.
yes. Yes. Okay, here's
Very
a
hit or
question.
miss.
A24,
Yeah.
they are what? They are the
It follows.
the production company?
Yes,
They-
like Blumhouse.
Yeah. So they're... Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I've
right.
never
They're just a
fully
production
understood
company.
their role, but I guess they're just a production company. Okay.
Yeah, I think their like goal was to kind of create something really new, take small things, take small projects, and give them the attention that they could, because that's what Blumhouse was originally, and then it got really big, and then it didn't do any little things anymore, and so A24 kind of stepped in and was like, dude, these people have some really cool ideas. Let's give them a shot. And then, yeah. But not everybody has good ideas.
No, that's true. So this episode will be slightly unique because we are going to be diving deep into religious concepts,
Yep.
specifically around Mormonism, but just religion in general. If you've seen the movie, then you're probably comfortable with everything that we're going to say. But if you have not, just a warning that we're going to be talking about that stuff, and we are going to be giving our opinions
Yeah.
on things. So take it as you will. But
Take it with however many grains of salt you need to take it.
yeah, or pepper, however you want to take it.
Or pepper.
Well, I guess right off the bat, Craig, what did you think
Yeah.
about this movie?
It was awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad you liked it. I have not been able to really get a read on you for this movie. And I was like,
I was gonna
oh,
try
does he not like it?
I was going to try so hard to just go on this rant, but I was like, I don't know if I can without smiling. And so
Yeah.
I was going to totally blow it, but I was going to be like, this movie sucks, like A24, another A24 crap movie. But it was tense from basically after the first 5, maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it honestly never drops that. Like, it never stops feeling tense throughout the entire movie. There's not, and it's such a weird movie, because I was talking to Jesse about this, but there's not like, on paper, this movie seems like a boring movie. It's a lot of talking. Yeah. There's some horror stuff in it, but on paper, it's just a guy talking to two girls for basically the entire movie.
It's a movie about a conversation about religion.
Exactly.
On the surface, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
But the way the writing, for one, and then Hugh Grant for two, holy crap.
Yeah.
Killer in this movie. Without him, this movie's still good, but definitely not great if you don't have somebody that can do what he did with this movie. But everything on paper makes it seem like kind of a boring type movie, but the whole time it was just like tense. It was kind of freaky. You never knew what was going to happen because you just didn't know. You know, you don't know where this thing is going. You don't know how crazy it's going to be, how not crazy it's going to be. You don't know what Hugh Grant's character is going to do, right? And the way they built his character was so good. And so it reminded me a lot of John Goodman in 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah.
Where you were
Very
just
similar.
like, are you good? Are you evil? I don't know what you're going to do next, stuff like that. And not that you don't necessarily know if he's good or evil. It quickly portrays that, but like you still don't quite know how, I guess maybe not evil, but how maybe insane he might be. Like, is he taking him through something that's like kind of just borderline okay, or is he doing something more crazy like?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was great though.
It was so good. We are going to go no spoilers like real quick
Yep.
here at the beginning, but I have a lot to say in the spoilers, so I'll save most of it for that. This is what I will say. So as a person who has been on a Mormon mission, this was a very accurate representation of, in most cases, of how most missionaries would act kind of through the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's so much that happens. This is what I find so fascinating about this movie is there are a lot of, in some ways, classic psychological thriller tropes. But the reason it works so well and it isn't just like, oh my gosh, why don't you just leave, is because of the missionary aspect of it. And I'll talk about all of that because it's why I think this movie is as good as it is and what allows it to be. But I think it's so clever in so many ways. And it's, on one hand, it's such a clever and interesting study of religion and of faith and of what causes belief, where are people's roots of belief.
Right.
And yeah, just Hugh Grant's character just being like, do you mean well? Are you psychotic? Are you this or this or this? Like, it's just, I just think this movie's fascinating. It's so thought-provoking for me. And I think
Very
what also
thought-provoking.
is cool is that it can be thought-provoking for, I think, anybody. Because I've talked to people
Yes.
who are active members of the LDS Church who have seen this movie and came out of it like, oh, my faith was strengthened. Whereas,
Right.
like, I may have had the opposite experience or just kind of whatever. Like, you can kind of take it how you want to in a lot of aspects. You can agree with who you want to. So it's just like, I don't know. It's so specific yet so ambiguous in so many ways that
Right.
I think it was written beautifully and is just really, really clever.
And I would also even say, I mean, you brought up like stereotypical like horror tropes and stuff. I know like the one you just kind of quickly brought up is, oh, why don't they leave? To me, I mean, again, this isn't really like spoilers. This happens right at the beginning. If you've seen the trailer, you know that he basically captures them. But they do. They literally can't,
Yeah.
Like, so they felt more smart in actually the way that they thought about things and the way that they went about things, that it didn't feel so much like, oh, this is just another horror trope, or it felt warranted, and they felt more intelligent than most just people in a horror movie that just walk into a room, pitch black, don't ever turn the lights on, little things like that. Or like, why do they even go into this house? They go to this house for an exactly perfect reason why they're there.
Yeah.
They're there to teach him, and then they can't leave,
Exactly. Like, it's not, they go to this house, and honestly, I mean, there's a shot of the house that they try to make look creepy, but the house isn't creepy at all. Like, it's just normal house.
It's just a house.
And so it's like, in any other movie, you see the creepy house and you're like, don't go in. But the reason this is so clever is it's all based around these missionaries. And I don't think necessarily this movie is about Mormonism. I just think that Mormon missionaries are the easiest catalyst to discover this conversation about religion because they're so well known and they're so eager, which is why they go to the houses because they are literally there to do that thing.
Right.
So that's what sets the whole thing up. It's just fascinating. It's so fun.
You could do the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses, but not as many people know about them that they do about the LDS Church. And they even bring that up as how more popular certain religions are. And so you kind of have to choose. I mean, your two like real big ones are like Christianity and probably like Mormonism, you know?
Yeah.
And so Mormonism has the setup much easier and everybody knows about it and everybody kind of knows a little bit about the history. And so they can relate to it very easily, right?
Yeah.
If this was about, you know, Muslim or something else, I probably still would have joined it, but I wouldn't have been able to connect as much with it because I don't know as much about that religion, right?
Right.
Where this one is very well known. A lot of people know about it. And so it was a good foundation to create this movie because it's not just about one religion. It's about all. It's about belief. It's about that. That's not, they're picking this so they can pick apart the Mormons and you know, be horrible to them or anything like that. That's not what this is. You know, it's a good premise for a story that needed to happen that people can connect to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited to really break it down and get into all of the points. So, what would you give this out of 10?
9.4.
Nice.
What would you give it?
I would give it a 9.8.
Nice.
There's like a couple things that towards the end that I think are slightly corny, just the way they're done. But everything else I love. And I do feel like I think that this movie will have varying levels of impact on people. For me, for example, so for those of you who don't know, Craig and I both grew up members of the LDS Church. Neither of us are a part of it now. I made it a little bit further than Craig did.
You went on the mission,
so
I did not.
I went on the mission. I got married in the temple. I did kind of all of the things. And you left when? What age?
I mean, like fully is probably 17, 18.
Okay. Yeah. So as somebody who has just recently, within the last few years, kind of had my own realizations and left, a lot of this hit way differently.
Right.
Because I was so in it and so involved. So there's just things in this that are so fascinating. And it'll be fun, I think, to give my missionary perspective of this because, again, like I said, I think a lot of it's super accurate. So, and one quick fun fact about this. This takes place in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, really?
And which is where my family lives, just right kind of outside of Boulder. And then the one sister missionary, she's like, lives in Salt Lake, but she's like, oh, but I'm originally from Philadelphia, which is me. I live basically in Salt Lake, and I'm also from Philadelphia. So I feel a little creeped out by this movie.
They could have just switched it for you.
I feel a little stalked, but it's fine. But yeah, so we're going to get into it. And yeah, I mean, super recommend watching this movie. Honestly, like for me, I would watch it no matter who you are.
Right.
If you're the only thing in the movie, there's literally not, I think, a bit of language, and there's no nudity. There is some gore.
Yep.
But that's it. So it's a little gory and on some parts.
Gore. Yeah, a couple parts.
But yeah, I just think everyone's gonna have a unique experience with this movie, which I think makes it so cool.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah.
It's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you can, do it.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a limited showing, but I think they're like starting to roll it out in more theaters because it's gaining popularity.
Yeah.
The first time we went on a Sunday afternoon, and there were probably like 8 people in our theater. But then last night when we went, our theater was full.
Oh yeah,
Well, pretty much full. So
when I was supposed to go last week, it was all booked out.
oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Huh?
So,
I'm interested to see. I know that it did 11 million opening weekend. So I'm really curious to see if that number's like exploded or if it's. Do you know what it's at right now?
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
It's at.
Cool. It'll be fun to see that. But that's at the end. So
That's at the end.
Stick around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're not sticking around, bye.
Bye.
We'll miss you.
See you later.
Hope you find your dad.
Hope you find your dad. And
right.
go subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on social media. So
Yeah. Do it.
should we jump into spoilers?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Right before we get into visuals, can I say just like one thing?
Visuals.
I'm going to try to make this as coherent of a thought as possible, although it's a little tricky, and I'll try to get into it a little bit more in the story. One of the reasons that this works is because of conditioning. And regardless of kind of how you feel, I think it's almost an objective fact that anybody in a high demand religion of any kind, especially if you're born into it, you have a certain level of conditioning that almost forces you to either make certain decisions or think a certain way. It's not necessarily a full force, but it's kind of like if you isolate a child and teach them that the color of the sky is red, they will think that forever until somebody truly challenges them and they have the critical thinking to not believe that, right? So that's kind of why so much of this works. And again, like they layer it with, because, anybody else would not go in that house in some ways because they wouldn't be at that house in the first place. But because they felt like they needed to go on the mission and they got the referral for this guy, so they go to his house and he opens up the door and he seems so nice and she just wants to have a baptism. She goes in, right? Yeah. They go in and, I think there's so much that goes into them being very trusting, where he's like, yeah, my wife's in the other room. And they touch on all of this and we'll get to it in the story. But I think just like the big important thing about this is the conditioning of members of a high demand religion, and especially those that choose to go out on any type of like mission or preaching anything, right? So
right.
That will be our basis of things for me. Okay, let's talk about the visuals. So I thought that this movie was...
I don't know why this is visuals.
Craig is doing hand motions to everybody who's listening, which is most of you. Craig is doing some type of hand motion with his fingers are upward and his hands are coming down. And then it's almost like what you'd picture if somebody was showing, like maybe the sign in sign language for confetti, maybe? Or streamers? I'm unsure.
For some reason, that's visuals. I don't know why.
It is. First off, I think that this movie was filmed really, really beautifully. And it was another one of those movies, kind of like Game Night, or I think there's a couple others, maybe Get Out, where every shot every shot felt super intentional. And there were some shots that were just a one-off. They generally, things were framed pretty normally during the dialogue, right? There wasn't anything super special, but every once in a while, they would just do, actually maybe just once, they did one frame where it's like right up on Hugh Grant's face and you can't even see his mouth. Like he is zoomed far into the frame and he just says something. And I don't even know if what he says is super intriguing in that moment, but then everything else is just kind of normal. And there's certain things, there's one shot, which I love when people do this, that comes up one of the sisters from behind and it's upside down and then it comes up over her head and is right side up. That's my favorite shot of cinema.
Cool
like
shot.
I love when people do that. So
such a cool shot.
Just really overall like videography and shot choice was really good for me.
And everything just looked good too. Yeah. I mean, the sets were good. The amount of gore and stuff that we got, it all felt really nice.
The gore, the blood and stuff was super well done.
So good.
It was the right color, which is usually the big thing, and it felt like it was the right texture and like thickness for the most part.
Smoothness.
Which is honestly like so often I feel like we've talked about how much of a deal breaker blood has been
Oh yeah.
on this podcast. Like
Oh yeah.
sometimes it's way
you
too
think of,
bright
like,
red.
Yeah, you think of game night, when the dog's shaking the blood off, and it's literally it's just
It's
like
Kool-Aid, dude.
It's food.
like
It's food dye.
Yeah. Yeah. And this one felt really real. Like when he's cut open Sister Barnes' arm and is reaching into it. Oh, and when he pulls something out and he goes, "Here it is." Oh no, that's a vein. And he goes back in to keep digging around. That for me was like it was gross. I didn't look the first time actually that I watched this movie, but the second time I was like, I gotta just watch. I gotta see it.
Oh my gosh, really?
I kind of like I knew what he was
Do you really
doing,
have
so I
that
didn't
big of
feel
an
like
issue?
yeah.
Oh,
I'm a
okay.
little queasy with like certain things. When it's like I can see somebody get their head chopped off all day, but when it's that slow like pulling things apart, that's way different for me.
I remember in 127 hours you were saying it was rough to
Yeah. Oh yeah.
watch the
Yeah.
arm cutting off.
It was
scene.
like I watched a lot of that like through shielded eyes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That one was a little rough.
So I'm in the boat of every once in a while a movie comes along that you have so much time to write notes, but you're so invested
Yeah.
that you don't want to look away. And that was this movie. I have 2 notes for visuals and 2 notes for story, and that is it. Because
Dude, I think that's fine.
I was
'cause
just
we've got-
engaged. I
Yeah.
was just engaged.
We'll have plenty to talk about. And
Oh, we'll have so much
it
to
hasn't
talk
even
about.
been 24 hours since this movie ended for us. So
Yeah.
it's still fresh,
Oh yeah, 100%.
But
Definitely
yeah,
have
give me
been
your
24 hours
visuals
since
notes.
This movie ended.
Or is that it? What?
What?
Oh, it has been 24 hours. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
We didn't go see it at 8. It ended at 8. Okay, it's been 24 hours.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. Do you have any other visual notes?
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't said either one of them.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Yeah, the Bob Ross Monopoly was
Yeah.
hands down probably one of the best things in the that whole shot. And that's probably my favorite scene
Yeah.
in the whole movie because of how it's acted, how the story is, how it looks, everything like that. That's like one of those scenes that like will get replayed on YouTube or will blow up on TikTok or something like that, where people will be like, "Oh, that's very intriguing," right? This is one of the scenes that you pick from a movie to get people enticed because he just lays it all out and it's fascinating.
Oh, it's so fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
It is definitely the most intriguing. It's like one of the most intriguing metaphors of all time for me. And on top of that, it's the setup for everything.
And it's so
It's the
eye-opening.
setup for the whole movie. It is. It's very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then my only other note
Yeah, go ahead.
this is like way at the end, but Hugh Grant has built basically his house, but like a little modeled version of it. Kind of just the interior of his house, right? And he's putting the girls as they progress where they're supposed to be at because I'm assuming he's done this quite a few times. I'm assuming that's who the people are at the very end. And she goes to look at the model to try and see if there's like a way out or something. And as she's running up to the model, she herself becomes the little model and is like running up in the model like game night.
Yeah.
Such a cool shot. Such
Really
a cool shot. Fantastic. They did not need to do that. And it literally is like, it's like 5 seconds and that's it. But it's like, that is so much care and so much just like, they obviously wanted to really engage people and create something really cool.
Yeah.
Because that's one shot and then never do it again. They didn't even need to do it, but it was so cool. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
I loved that shot.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I think one of my favorite just like aspects, like just things that shows up in this movie, dude. When the prophet comes out with the pie, the first time I saw this, they came out and I was like, what on earth is happening? Because I think on one hand, it being A24, but on the other hand, only having seen a trailer that was clips from the first 10 minutes of the movie, I really didn't know where this movie was going to go, right?
Right.
Because in so many ways, like, I was well aware that this movie could go from really grounded in reality and religious concepts to they go to space and you don't know what's going to happen, right? There's no idea because people mess movies up all the time. So she comes out with the pie and I'm like, everything changes at that moment, right? Because the entire movie, it's these three people in this house and you're like, okay, he's trapped them in the dungeon. He's going to kill them. Easy, right?
Yep.
And she comes out and I'm like, first of all, looks so creepy, but not too creepy, but like, I think it's
fully covered.
Just scary enough, right? The veil. The old lady, the veil, sits down, it's dripping in the dungeon. She sits down with the pie and she just starts eating it with her hands.
The pie is
just
gross.
Like, you have no idea what is happening at that moment, right? You don't know what's his purpose, and he starts to explain, why he's doing it and everything, and so that was cool. And then, he's like, oh, she's going to get resurrected. All that stuff happens that we'll talk about in the story. But then one shot I love is they're trying to light the fire. And then just like really quickly in the background, it's way out of focus. But if you look at the chair at the table and the lady's gone. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I immediately noticed it. And I was like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. And then the camera just really, really slowly pans just a little bit. And you start to see the old lady behind Sister Paxton.
And it's behind.
Right behind her. It's it's like your heart's just like racing because you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, is she going to attack her? Is she going to explode? What's going to happen?
Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah. Because you don't know what's going to happen. That's the thing. You don't know how grounded this movie is.
Yeah. And then just it being so close up on her face, and she's so scary, and she's covered in blueberry or whatever she's covered in. And she starts talking about everything. She starts describing heaven. And then when she puts her, I don't know, maybe this is an acting thing, but she just like puts her finger up to her mouth and she's like, it's not real. It's like, oh, it's so scary. And you have no idea what she's talking about at the moment.
Yeah.
But, oh man, it's just, they made everything, even in the living room where it's, for all intents and purposes, is a very normal old person's living room.
Oh yeah.
It just felt normal, but also so tense.
Right.
And I think it was a combination of a lot of things, but
it is. Yeah, it's not just the visuals. It's the story in terms of the writing, and it's the acting between the three of them. You know,
it is just like even just the living room at the beginning when they're sitting down and talking. It truly is a perfect combination between shot choices, writing, acting, music, and just the set overall.
Oh yeah,
everything that's going on in that scene is so good, and then that just continues through the whole movie.
Yeah. That like living room scene is like your get out with the teacup and the mom and the boyfriend. You know, where it's just that. I mean, not quite on the same level, but like still really good. Where it's just that incredible acting, that tenseness, that again, literally, it does not go away. Like, even when he is just talking about freaking Monopoly, you're still wondering, like, what is happening? Because you still don't know. That was the beauty of this movie in terms of the trailer and just how they rolled everything out, where you don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, is this going to be like some crazy supernatural thing at the end and go super weird, right? Or is it going to be a super grounded movie? And is it just going to be about religion? Or is it going to get like partially start about religion and then get like super weird and stuff like that? Yeah. And so you don't know what's going to happen. And Hugh Grant's character is just so He's so calm. He's so collected. He's such a nice guy in terms of like how he talks and everything. And you keep waiting for him to just snap. And he never does. He never does. He stays his character. And so you're sitting there like, is he going to calmly talk about Monopoly, or is he going to go like crazy all of a sudden, right? And so you're just like, you're tense the whole time because you don't know what they're going to do. And they did it so well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go super dumb.
No, it never does.
No,
they
never
keep
does.
you wondering if something super bizarre is going to happen. And it doesn't. Nothing outside of reality.
No, very grounded. And I like that.
So just really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you give the visuals?
Jeez. I mean, 200.
Yeah.
It's perfect for what it needs to be, and it's got some really cool scenes in it, right?
I would fully agree.
Yeah.
I think they did a really good job with everything. I mean, including like the storm and everything just felt super real.
Yeah.
So
it was great.
Okay. Let's talk about the story. So here's our
Talk about the meat.
Let's talk about the meat and potatoes.
This is the meat.
We'll talk about like the meat. Yeah, we'll just go through it.
Yeah.
So can I give a quick synopsis of the movie?
Yeah, please.
In case somebody's watching. I'll be super quick. So 2 missionaries, sister missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints show up. They have received a message that a man named Mr. Reed wants to learn about the church, right? Which is super common for missionaries. You get, especially in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, nobody wants you to talk to any of their friends about the church, and nobody tells you they want to talk to you about the church. But in the United States, people are a little bit more eager. They will send you things, and so they show kind of at the beginning, they have this list on their phone just of people they need to contact that day. So they go to his house. They get invited in, and they say, as a rule, and this is true, as a rule, sister missionaries have to have another adult female present in the home to be allowed to enter. It's the same thing with the male missionaries. They have to have another male in the home if they're in the house with a female. So he says, yeah, my wife's inside. So they say, okay, cool, works for us. That was the one. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, maybe you're going to say it. Keep going.
Well, in my experience, most would not enter unless they visibly see her. But I'm sure there are plenty out there who do take people's words for it. But I think that's probably a little bit less common. But also it's like he's this nice, handsome, older gentleman who's very kind, British man. Like it would be super easy to trust him right away, right?
Of course,
So
of course.
It totally makes sense. I don't think that's really an issue with the movie at all. They go inside. They just kind of start talking about the church, and he starts to like question them about certain things, but he's being kind about it, and he's being kind of overly eager. He's not like being mean or accusatory or anything, but he is, and he starts asking the deep questions about the church that usually you hope as a missionary nobody brings up, right?
Right.
Because for the most part, missionaries do not know a thing about any of that. They don't really truly know anything about polygamy. They don't know anything about the history of Joseph Smith. They know what the church has wanted them to know, which is not any of the bad stuff. And so he starts to question these things and asks, the awkward question about polygamy and starts asking these things. They start to get a little creeped out. He says that his wife's got pie in the oven. So he's like, let me go check on the pie. And they're like, okay, hold on. We need to make a call. And they've gotten really uncomfortable at this point. They feel like they should leave. They go to the door. Door's locked from the inside. There's no lock. There's no nothing. It just won't open. So then they're like, okay, let's just go back and, see him and his wife and get the pie or whatever. So they go back, and he is in this kind of miniature chapel that he's built in his house. And
well, before that, because they start to smell the pie, and he's like, what flavor would you guess it is? And they say blueberry. And so when he goes away, because he goes away to say, let me see if my wife is okay for you to come see her. So before it was like,
oh, right,
she's going to come to the table, and then it's like, let's see if she's okay for you to come see her. And then the sister Barnes turns the candle around, and it says blueberry pie.
Yeah.
And so they get
and that's
super
kind of,
like creeped out.
Initially when they get kind of creeped out. And there's just some weird stuff that's happening that I'll talk about a little later that are kind of details, but they go back into this little, they're kind of walking back there and like, oh, this is getting a little creepy, but they keep going back because they know he's back there. They end up in this little chapel that he has in his house, and he starts basically posing all of these religious ideas, and he says, he's like, he lets them know that he did so much studying. He's tried to figure out which church was the true church. He finally ended up figuring out which religion was the only true religion. And then he basically starts, what he's doing the entire time is he is studying them. Mm-hmm. He's studying how they will react to a bunch of different stuff. And he has 2 doors. And he's talking about, and they're like, we just want to leave. They keep kind of telling him, like, we want to leave. They're not screaming at him. They're still trying to be polite. They're also obviously trying not to get killed. So they just want to leave. He's like, sorry, the door's on a timer. I can't open it. There's nothing I can do about it, but you can leave out the back. And and he's super like, you can leave at any time. Like, he's obviously being weird about it, but he's like, I'm not forcing you to be here. You can leave whenever you want. And so she opens the door, and it's very obviously not the way out. Then she goes to the other door, and it's also not the way out. And he just kind of keeps getting creepier and creepier. He's posing all of these ideas of religion and where religions come from and how they're all kind of iterations of the same thing and all of these things. And eventually writes belief and disbelief on the doors, and he says, just go through whichever door feels like best suits you. They end up kind of choosing their door. They go out, down it. They're in a dungeon. He keeps playing with them. He keeps testing them, seeing if they believe a certain thing. He has somebody supposedly get resurrected right in front of them. All of these things happen. And then at the end, well, we'll talk about the end. But that's basically what it is he's studying these people the entire time. Mm-hmm. He's trying to figure them out. He's trying to teach them a lesson also at the same time. And so we'll go to there as far as the story, and then we'll talk about the rest of it.
Okay. I was going to stop you, but so when they get to his house and they're talking to him, because it's raining like crazy, right? It's super cold. And so they're still outside. They're talking to him for a little while, and he's like, do you want to come in? And they're like, oh, sorry, there has to be a woman present. And they say, do you have any woman roommates? Instead of just saying do you have a wife or do you have a spouse or like something like that. I love how they, like you said, they do it so well in terms of just how they portray how they would talk. Not everybody, obviously.
And how awkward it is.
Of course.
They're so awkward.
It's very awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
How is it not awkward?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So let's start our notes from the beginning, because there is something that you wanted to talk to me about.
Yeah.
At the beginning. So the very, very, very beginning of the movie is really funny. The 2 sister missionaries are sitting on a bench, and they're talking about a few different sexual topics. And they're not talking about it in a sexy way or anything. They're talking about it how Mormons talk about sex. Very, very truly how they talk about it.
Very awkward. Don't
Super
say the
awkward.
words a lot of the time.
Yeah, they use the word peen, which is the most Mormon word for penis ever. Peen and pee-pee.
And they usually will say pornography rather than just porn or...
Yeah. And so there were a couple things in here that I think were maybe slightly inaccurate. Now, it does fully depend on people's experiences, but like missionaries probably wouldn't fully tell another missionary that they were ever watching pornography. They would probably never actually say that. They'd probably be more ambiguous about it, like, oh, I heard of somebody. But I guess what she says is interesting. And maybe,
somebody
there are
else
people
was watching it and they just happened to glance right at the moment that it happened.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some people who maybe were not members of the church before or were really inactive for a period of time who go on their missions. And then they're like, yeah, like this one time I was doing acid and this happened, right? Like you look at people like that. But so it was interesting to see that. But it's funny because she's talking basically about this porn video that she was watching. And she talks about how basically it's like this amateur film and you hear somebody knock on the wall and say, we can hear you. And then the girl stops. And she's like, you could see her soul leave her body. And at that moment, I just realized like, God is real. We all have souls. And I think what you asked me was like, is that at all accurate?
There's no way that is accurate.
Craig. You have been gone for too long. Let me tell you this. I'm sure that is not a lot of people's experience. But what is accurate about that is how often people will use in the church, in probably many churches, but I only have experienced the Mormon church, so I will just talk from that experience. How often people use things like that, and even if it's not porn, just kind of almost anything to be like, this happened and I just knew God was real. That's, I think, the point that they were trying to get across. And I think they were exaggerating it so you could understand the point. But it's like, it's things like that where, and I'm not trying to bash on anybody's faith, but it's like, oh, I was at the store and I accidentally knocked over this really expensive thing and it landed on the ground and it didn't break. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, God is real and he does love me. And it's like, that is so lovely for you. That's great. But like, are you also, maybe you're trying to convince yourself of something?
Right.
So I think that was the point they were trying to get across, is that sometimes there are these absolutely ridiculous lengths that people go to try to like convince themselves that God is real or that such and such a thing is true. So I thought that scene was really funny. And it is true,
it was
though,
very
like,
funny.
I mean, missionaries will talk about sex, but it is in this super weird, because I would probably bet you 98% of Mormon missionaries are virgins.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not that high, maybe 90, 95%. But like, they talk about it like they don't know anything, because guess what? They don't. They have no idea what any of it means. So when they're talking about like how the condoms are certain sizes or whatever, it's just so funny.
The Magnum's the same as a regular.
Yeah. It's just,
and it's slowly zooming out like while they're talking, and then the back of the bench is like size does matter.
Ad. Yeah.
And it's a Magnum condom ad, which is just, again, obviously they did that intentionally,
Yeah.
What are the odds they're actually sitting at a bench talking about that while that's happening?
And maybe that's why they're talking about it.
It could be true, yeah. Well, obviously it is, because the first thing they're talking about is a Magnum condom.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what's on the bench, But I'm surprised they would sit on the bench with that being on there.
I know, right? Yeah. It's so funny. The amount of times, too, like, so I went on my mission in Ecuador, and the amount of times that, like, Ecuador's crazy because as far as I know, there are no laws. There probably are, but I never figured out what any of them were. And so you could just like post porn anywhere. So like most people, if you had a motorcycle, you'd have like actual naked photos of real women, like stickers, like on your motorcycle. So usually it was just like from the waist up, but sometimes it was full nude. And they're not drawings or anything. Like these are actual photos of human beings.
Photos.
And so sometimes we'd like sit down or we'd like be talking to somebody on the street, and it's like right next to us is just porn, just like this big, right here next to us. And it's like, you like try not to look, but it's kind of like also like it's fascinating, and it's a naked lady,
course.
and it's like, but it's also like such a bizarre concept that people are just like, yeah, that's my porn bike. You know, like, it's just like, oh, dude.
It's so weird.
We could do an entire episode where I just rant about Ecuador. But so
That'd be
anyway,
fun.
there are moments as a missionary where you're just in these weird positions and sometimes you just talk about it because it's just weird,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, what do you got next? Well, I guess how far in is yours?
Mine's pretty far in.
Mine's like kind of when
Like,
they're in the...
almost towards the end.
Mine's kind of when they're in the chapel is most of mine.
Okay.
So when he's talking about all the religions, right? He talks about basically like I studied and I in college or whatever, he's like I studied all of these different religions and
Yeah, he's been studying for like 50 years.
yeah, super long time. And he says something that I actually find super impactful. And one thing I think is interesting about this movie is, for me personally, a lot of the movie, he was right.
Oh, yeah,
Which-
yeah.
You don't love when the psychopath is right because it makes you kind of question
No.
yourself a little bit.
100%.
At the same time, he just made really good points. And so one of my favorite things that he said was, he said, in all of my research and study, I found that the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah.
And I think that is entirely true. If you look at any religion on its surface, they're all good for the most part.
Of course.
And then you hold any single one of them under a microscope and they start to fall apart
of course.
like instantaneously. So that was a really cool thing that I thought he said. Do you want to really quickly break down the garage sale board game metaphor?
Yeah. So the only thing that I don't remember is the first religion.
Yeah, so the first
The
religion
one that was
is
the landlord
Judaism.
is Judaism. Okay.
Yeah,
So
the
basically,
OG.
he's taught. It's great how he even just like talks about it, but like he's talking about beliefs and everything. He's like, so that brings us to Monopoly, and he just pulls Monopoly out, and you're like, the hell is going on right now?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Because you have no idea, right? And so he's like, he pulls out Monopoly, and he was like, obviously you know what this game is. It's this very popular board game where you go around the boardwalk, you buy stuff, you try to basically make everybody else bankrupt, and you win the game, right?
Yeah.
He was like, but did you know that there was a previous board game from like 30 years before or something like that called The Landlord's
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called.
something?
Let's see. Landlord board game is called, I think it's called The Landlord's Game or Landlord.
Okay, The Landlord's Game. So he pulls out The Landlord's Game and he opens up the box and you see the map of the game, the board game.
Yeah.
And it looks very similar to Monopoly. Where it's just, but instead of like pictures and stuff, it's just text, right? It's like, it even seems like it says boardwalk, like 500, but he talks about how there's go and there's free parking and there's jail and all that other kind of stuff. And so he was like, he pulls out Judaism as the first like Holy Bible. And he's like, this is the
Torah, I
Landlord's
believe.
Game. Yeah, thank you. And he was like, then he pulls out the Holy Bible and he's like, this is Christianity. And he puts it next to Monopoly, right? Because he talks about how Monopoly, you don't hear about the Landlord's Game, right?
Right.
It's the first, it's the original, which is what he's saying is Judaism. But Christianity is the more popular one that came way after the fact because they do a lot more marketing in a way, right?
Yeah.
To be able to reach more people. Then he pulls out the Holy Bible, but with Islam, right?
The Quran. Yep.
Yeah, that's the next one. And he's like, this one came like 100 years later, and then
It's
he pulls
Monopoly.
out the
Ultimate
electronic
banking.
banking. Yeah.
Yeah. The one with the credit cards.
Because he's trying to tell them about iterations, right? That's his whole game with this.
Yeah.
And so he's got all three of those books. And then he's like, can I see your Book of Mormon? And so they give him the Book of Mormon. And he was like, and then we have this. 800 years later, we have this book. And he lays it down on top of the Holy Bible, and he pulls out Bob Ross Monopoly.
Beautiful.
This is one of the funniest things ever. And how it's basically like, it's almost like a side quest, a whole side story, you know?
He calls it the zany regional spinoff.
That's what it is, the spinoff.
To be exact. So
yeah. And so like you were saying before, where the more you know, the less you know, and a lot of this stuff that, and again, I hope everybody understands this. We're not just talking about one, we're talking about all of them, because I'm sure every other religion, the more you scrutinize it, the more you look into it, the more hidden things you don't know about, right? We're mainly going to be talking about LDS because we know that, right? I know that religion more than I know any other religion. But just seeing that, I didn't even realize was even a thing. Like, I knew that the Book of Mormon was obviously later. I didn't realize how much later it was than all of the other books, and how even the Holy Bible wasn't the original. I thought that was the main original one, but I thought it was with Christianity, which is the point that he makes in the movie. You all think that's the original, just like Monopoly is and stuff like that. And so it's just it was very surreal having that portrayed in that movie.
It's the first time I've ever seen it portrayed like that ever in my life, or even remotely similar.
Right.
Like, I don't feel like I'd ever really, truly heard or seen anybody touch on that topic at all, really. I mean, of iterations of religion. And then he goes on to point out several, I think a dozen deities, gods, anything that, you know, he's like, they're all born on December 25th who were crucified and resurrected and all this stuff. And you know, some of the ones he's mentioning are inaccurate. Nobody thinks that Christ was actually born on December 25th. There's no evidence to support that. Stuff like that, where it's like, okay, whatever, his argument's thin. But the overall argument is very interesting, where far, far, far before people were talking about Jesus Christ, there were these gods that followed a very similar story. It's a legend story of a holy figure who comes down, leads the people to such and such a thing, is hated, gets crucified, comes back to life. That's been told since the dawn of time about so many different people or beings. And so it's like, if you don't know that scene too is like super fascinating, because you think Jesus is the only one that the story is about. Then you realize there's others, right? Yeah,
there's tons of others.
And so, he's talking about
predating thousands of years before.
Yeah, and so he's just talking about iterations, and he's like, the reason that, you know, certain things do so well is because of marketing. And he's like, you missionaries are salespeople for the church, and that is 100% what they are.
100%, yeah.
And most of them know that to a certain extent. Now, they might not want to use that language.
Of course. Because it sounds bad.
That's what you are. You are marketing for the church. 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
You're a door-to-door salesman. There's no difference. There is no difference than the guy selling you pest control than you trying to sell him on religion as a whole, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you could say that selling somebody on a religion that could change your entire life is much different than pest control, but like, it's the same thing at its core, right? Yeah. And that's again what he talks about. You don't know about the landlord's game because they didn't do that, right? They didn't have that marketing. They didn't have the sales force, right? That Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormonism, or even just the backing of Christianity, you know, religion and stuff like that, is they didn't have that, right? And so you become the most popular religion, but that doesn't mean that you're the true one. You're just the most popular, right? And you know, having been born in it and going away and everything, it's you know, I mean, it's hard to know what's real, what's not, you know, what's for the good, what's for the bad. But it just, the more and more you look into all the religions, it feels like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
That and,
Well,
and
one-
it's just is it to make money, or is it because they believe in it? Or like the best salespeople, have you sold enough people on it to create it? Because if it's all big, crazy, you know, monopoly on everything, they're doing a fantastic job, you know?
Yeah. One thing I love, though, is kind of after all of this, Sister Barnes challenges him, and
Yeah.
she said, you know, you're using this metaphor, and I love that she calls it a garage sale board game metaphor. I think it's
Yeah.
a clever line, but she says, you know, like, you gloss over, you say that, you know, Judaism isn't as popular, but then you completely ignore the Holocaust, and you completely ignore the fact that, you know, Jewish people have faced probably the most persecution of any religion or cultural group, maybe in history.
100%.
Although the Mormons love to pretend that it's them, but that's my own little personal jab. Sorry about that one. But so that one is interesting. Now he goes on to the doors and he writes belief and disbelief, and he says there's so many things that he says that I just like honestly resonate with so much, that are truly so fascinating to think about. And he goes to the belief door and he says, so if we do believe God is real, and he watches us when we masturbate, and he's so petty that he only helps you if you beg him, and he hates gay people for being what he created them to be, then that's terrifying. And then he goes to the disbelief door, and you're like, well, that was crazy. And he goes to the disbelief door, and he says, and if we don't believe that God exists, and that we're all horny ants floating on a log, and that nothing matters, and that basically existence is meaningless, well, then that's frightening. And like when he said those two things, I was like, existential crisis. It's happening
100%. 100%.
And it's so cool. And then again, Sister Barnes says something that I think is very cool. And she says, you're trying to think of it in black and white, but belief is a spectrum, which I think is true.
100%.
Because he pulls out the quote from Gordon B. Hinckley, which is a real quote, where he says either all of the church is true or none of it is. So if you look into even just one little thing that's not true, then you got your answer. Prophet of God, by the way. So but then, she poses it as a spectrum, and you're more than welcome to look. But I don't know. But she poses it as a spectrum, and I think that's a much healthier aspect to look at any religion or spirituality. It's way healthier to think of it as a spectrum. But if you do choose to go on either side, it truly is terrifying, right? Because if you look at God almost objectively, it's scary, right? Because it's one person fully in control of everybody, and they are petty, and they do need you to worship them, according to most, for them to truly bless you. And that's if you think about that just from an objective standpoint, that is the scariest thing ever. This all-powerful, all-knowing being who can, if they want to, squish you.
Yes, exactly.
Metaphorically or literally, you know?
Yeah.
So these really, really cool topics are brought up in these really interesting ways, and I just think it was written so beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Very, very well done.
Yeah.
And just it really for me, and I'd be very curious to know what people's thoughts are that are with a religion, go and see it, and they have their faith like strengthened.
Yeah.
I'd be so curious to know like their takes on everything, because for me, this strengthened my disbelief of just all religions, right?
Yeah.
And And because that's kind of been my thing is, having left, where else do you go? But for me, there doesn't seem to be anywhere else right now, and I don't care enough to really know, or figure it out. I've got my own belief of if I'm a good person, I'm living a good life, and that's good enough,
Yep.
And so it's very curious because it can be taken in such different ways, right?
Yeah.
You can take it from Hugh Grant's side where you're like, oh, yeah, that's totally true. Every point he's making makes 100% sense. And you can take it from Sister Barnes and Paxton that's like, oh, yeah, no, they're making sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that they're saying is correlating with how I'm feeling. And I love that this is mainly story because it's character development, but I love that Sister Barnes is it Paxton, right?
Paxton, yeah.
Paxton. Sister Barnes is definitely more of the confident, more tough person.
Yeah, for sure.
And Paxton is really the happy, giddy, loves everybody, nobody's evil in the world, and very timid, scared type person.
Yeah.
And so when he tells them to choose the door, Paxton goes to the disbelief and is like, you know what? You make some really good points, and I've never thought about it that way. I'm going to go to the disbelief, basically, right?
Yeah.
And Barnes
to
is like...
appease him.
And to please him. Because again, at this point, they know they're not leaving. They know he's not a good guy, so they're not hiding their feelings anymore in terms of with Sister Barnes. And so she's like, no, all this stuff that you said just makes me believe it even more because you're missing out on certain parts. You're skewing it in different ways. I'm going through the belief because that's what I believe in, Mm-hmm. But then Paxton's like, no, we need to go through this door.
She said we need to choose the right.
We need to choose the right, which is hilarious. Yeah. And she's like, this is the door he wants us to go through because he's telling us all this stuff to make us not believe anymore. We need to go through the disbelief. And Barnes is like, no, I believe in it, so I'm going to go through belief. And so they both go through belief. And they show both stairs. And this is the other thing that I think is very, very cool. When they go through the belief and they walk down the stairs and they get to their basic little cellar place, both doors led to the exact same room.
Yeah, which I think was a metaphor.
100%.
I think depending on what you believe, I think in many ways, I think everybody's going to the same place, right, whether you believe or whether you don't. So,
right. And very cool, you know. It didn't even matter which one they chose because I was almost curious if it was going to be very different based off of their choices.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the trailer, that's kind of how they portray it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. I mean, they go down there. That's where you meet the prophet, and Hugh Grant is talking to him through a little pipe and is basically saying, you're going to witness a miracle right now. There's this chemical in this blueberry pie that's going to kill her, but in a couple minutes, she's going to wake up. And so the lady willingly sits down, eats the pie in the super grossest way ever. And
she didn't have a fork. You got two perfectly good forks at the end of your arms.
Yep. Face plants into this pie, and he forces them to go and check if she's breathing.
That I thought was also clever. Because if you don't do that, then I think you ruin some of the intrigue of the movie. But yeah, they check the pulse and they check the breathing.
Yeah, you ruin the intrigue and you also ruin what he's trying to portray to them. Because if they don't check the pulse or breathing, they can just say she didn't actually die. Right?
Yeah, you just do what every other movie did, and they're like, oh, yeah, we took a substance that slowed the heart down so much that it seems like you're dead, right? Like, people do all the time.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah, and then this was the one issue was, well, I mean, I don't take too much issue with it, but then Venom himself, Topher Grace, shows up as maybe a ward missionary. I don't think he was supposed to be portraying like a 20-year-old missionary because, first of all, they have companions and they have to be with them all of the time unless you're in the bathroom, and then even then still
Gotta be holding their hand from underneath the door.
Yeah, under the stall door. But so I think he was just like, maybe he was a service missionary. He could have been a senior missionary. He could have been a lot of different things. There are different types of missionaries. So I'm like not as bugged by that as some people are. Because some people have like a huge hang up with that. They're like, who is he even supposed to be? And it's like, doesn't matter. Like there's so many things he could be. But so he shows up. They run up the stairs to the door, and they're screaming, trying to get him to hear them, which there's no way that he does. And during this, I guess later you find out, well, we'll save it in case people don't know what's happening. But they go back down, and Sister Paxton, also they pull the matches. So they pull the rug. This was one thing that bugged me. I feel like they were pulling that rug way too slowly, but it ended up not
why not
mattering
just
anyway.
yank it?
Yeah, why not yank it? I guess if you yank it too hard, maybe you do the magic trick where you pull it really hard and everything stays in place.
But you don't need to pull it that hard.
I know. They could have pulled it fast.
They're literally moving it and they're like...
That's literally, I think, my only gripe of the movie. But, so, I'm not even going to take points off for it.
I got a couple about this part.
Okay, so they pull it down, they get the matches, they go down, and Sister Paxton is like, her head is moved. And Sister Barnes like, no, you're imagining it. Like, I remember it differently. And she's like, no, like, she has moved. She's not in the same position. And then they're trying to light a fire. They're trying to light her coat on fire so that they can, like, burn the wood and stuff. And then that's when you see the prophet resurrected behind her. And you're like, ah, it's so scary. And she describes what she saw in the afterlife and all that. So that was a really cool scene, I think. Just with the prophet.
So the only, I guess if you want to keep this technically a secret still, we'd have to keep going before
No, it's okay. We're in spoilers.
Okay. So basically, if you keep going in the story, because we can just keep going in the story, and then it will make more sense anyways.
Yeah.
If you keep going in the story, the prophet comes back to life. Hugh Grant comes down, and he knows that they have the matches, and so he lights their last match for them because basically they were trying to create a fire to create smoke so that the elder could see, right? And they are horrible at lighting something on fire, but that's besides the point. They literally get a little flame and then they just shove it in the coat, and it's like,
no, she wasn't shoving it in. She was holding it underneath, but her coat just wasn't flammable, man.
No, it was like way further in, like the pocket.
Fine. Well, you know what? Not everybody knows how to use a match really well. Okay.
Fire needs oxygen. Okay.
That's facts. That's facts.
Most people should know that by now.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So he takes the prophet out. This is one part that I don't fully remember exactly, like what starts it. Is he just asking them what their thoughts were on what the prophet said?
Yeah, so they're saying, what did she say? And he asked them, what did you see? Like, what did you just witness happen? Right?
Okay.
Like, he kind of wants them to, like, admit that they saw her get resurrected or something like that. He's just seeing what they're going to say and what she says about the afterlife.
Right. And then he talks about how one of them is lying. And I don't remember how he gets to that moment.
So I don't remember exactly how he gets to it either, but he does say, like, one of you have been lying to me this whole time.
Right.
And yeah, that part I'm still not 100% sure
I don't remember
about.
Maybe he was asking if they thought the prophet was lying, and then he said, well, somebody in this room has been
Yeah,
lying to me
it was
this whole
something
time.
like that.
Or
And
something
then that's
like
when she
that.
talks about Taco Bell.
Yeah, we don't talk about Taco Bell.
Yeah, so she mentions when she was 4 years old, she ate Taco Bell. 50-something people were hospitalized, and she legally died for like 4 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Or she just died while they were operating on her kidneys or something, and so that's why she doesn't talk about Taco Bell. So, yeah.
Taco Bell's so good. And she basically says that she saw the same thing that the prophet saw.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so this whole time Sister Paxton has a letter opener, and Sister Barnes had talked to her about, well, no, Paxton didn't have it, Barnes had it, and Barnes gives it to Paxton and says, if I say magic underwear, you need to stab it in this guy's neck, right? Because at this point, they're in the cellar, they don't know what's going on. This is before they've seen the prophet. And she's like, I can't do that, all this other kind of stuff. So she starts describing that we don't talk about Taco Bell and everything like that. And so she gets all up in his face and is about to say magic underwear because she's like, she phrases it in some way that it correlates to it. And as soon as she says magic, freaking Hugh Grant slits her neck.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not right in the middle. It's kind of like off a little bit, right? But she starts bleeding out and she dies, passes out, whatever. Yeah. And Hugh Grant had noticed that there was a scar on her arm. Mm-hmm. And so he cuts open her arm and pulls out basically a birth control device. And what was the reasoning for that?
Okay, so this was really fascinating because the first time I watched this, I didn't get where it was going, and then I got it this time, I think. So he pulls it out and he says, he says, don't worry, she's going to be resurrected.
Right.
And then she keeps not coming back to life, and he's like, oh, you know what? I think I know why. And he pulls it out and he goes, do you understand simulation theory, that we're all living in a simulation or whatever? He's like, I believe that it's true. And Sister Barnes is actually an NPC. She's not a real person. And this is her microchip or whatever that proves that she's not a real person. So she can't come back to life. And so at first I was like, oh my gosh. The first time I saw this, I was like, is this actually real now? Was she a real robot? Is this going to go down this really stupid path? Because I totally knew that was a possibility. Yeah. And what he was doing, from what I understand, is he's still, this entire time, he's testing and researching, right? He is testing Sister Paxton's gullibility. And he wants to know because this, basically, from kind of how I understand this movie, the whole thing, and I guess not even how I understand it, but what he says is, the whole thing is how easy, why do you believe things just because somebody told you to believe it? Because I think for so much stuff, and even if now as adults people feel like they believe it, the fact of the matter is a lot of things that people in high demand religions believe at least started because somebody in power, usually parents, told them to believe it. Right. And then you just stay with it, right? So he's testing her and just seeing will she believe anything that I say to her? And what I'm kind of guessing, I think, is because there's, you go on to find all these other women that are down there. My guess is that they're not all sister missionaries from the same church, because that would definitely raise a red flag if there's 10 sister missionaries that go missing in the same area, right? My guess is they're probably from different religions. Maybe they're different. But so my guess is that he's studying different missionaries from different religions. And that's what this whole thing is about, is what will certain religions believe if I just throw it at them? Which I think is really another layer of fascination with this movie. But she's like, okay, I don't think she's a simulation. I think that's a contraceptive. And this was the one thing that they did actually get totally wrong. So he's like, have you ever heard of a missionary with birth control? And she's like, well, no, because she'd probably get shamed by the church. That's not accurate at all. Like really, really super Mormon active women will get birth control for so many different reasons, and they'll have it on their missions. I mean, they have it for acne or for hormone things, like all sorts of different stuff. So that's the one thing where it's like probably since the 90s, they haven't actually been shaming people for stuff like that. So
Right.
But anyway, she's like, yeah, I don't think that that's true. And he's like, oh, well, interesting, whatever. And he just kind of glazes past that and moves on.
Yeah. So then she tries to run away, but obviously she can't leave.
Yeah.
And this is where it flips. And she's like basically, reliving her conversation with Sister Barnes and gives herself because Sister Barnes tells her that we just have to, whenever he brings something up, we have to fight him on it. We have to
challenge
bring
him intellectually.
we have to challenge him intellectually because this is what he wants. He's trying to, we're trying to throw him off and stuff like that. And so she goes back down the stairs because obviously she can't go anywhere, and basically just starts talking to him about how she thinks that he lied about the prophet thing, and that it was, and he's like, what do you believe that I did with this then? And she's like, I think you have two people. I think one of them did die, and then you replaced it with somebody else. And he's like, well, how would I have done that? I was upstairs. And she's like, well, then the new prophet came and moved her because we were distracted when the doorbell rang. So this was the only thing that so he's done this obviously multiple times. I don't know if he's used the prophets. I don't know exactly if each religion is the same and he's trying to see how each one reacts or if they're a little bit different. But this person is supposed to be dead, the one that eats the blueberry pie, for like a few minutes, right? He tells them that. She'll come back in a few minutes. And it just so happens that the elder came at that exact moment to ring the doorbell.
Well, if you remember, so he's sitting up there when they're down in the dungeon. He's carving a little dude, and he puts it outside of the house, of his little model of the house, before the elder even rings the doorbell.
But how does he know?
Because they told him, they were like, so-and-so from our church is going to come looking for us.
Right.
So
but how does
he
know
already knows
exactly
it's
when they're going to look for him.
Dude, he's done this before.
I understand that, but it's not like they wait the exact same amount of time.
Yes, but I also wonder how much he's been studying these sister missionaries. Like, you never know how much he's known previously. And how did he know that Sister Barnes was lying about all this stuff?
Right.
There's so much stuff that I think like maybe he knew so much before going into tonight.
And I think he knew them, but that doesn't necessarily mean he knows exactly. Because freaking Topher Grace, it seems like he takes his good old dandy time before he starts looking for him. I mean, I don't know when he started. He sees that they normally clock back in at 5 o'clock.
But also,
he
could also just tell the prophet, like, okay, when you hear the doorbell ring, it's go time.
I know, but like, he's got this little short window. Like, what if Topher Grace got caught up with the people a few streets down,
and it's been several hours?
And it's
then he probably improvised.
Not even been so far. That's what I wanted to know, though. I wanted to know if he would have been like, it happened to work that your elder came at the right moment, or else I would have had to make a different distraction or something.
Right.
I don't know. It just seemed very coincidental that it just happened to happen in the 3-ish minutes that this person needed to die for, that he rings the bell and does this whole thing.
I do think there's something interesting to the fact that he carves the elder's little character and puts it outside before he even shows up. I think there's something there. Maybe it's
he
just
knows
like
relatively when they're going to come, right?
Yeah.
Like when the elder's going to be here. But it's hard to like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Eh.
So he's like, so how would this basically happen, right? And so she's like, I think the next prophet that you had put her somewhere. So she starts looking and where this prophet could have gone because they're all, very malnourished and stuff like that. And so she basically moves the table.
Yeah, he says to her, like, if you think that's true, then there has to be another way into this room.
Right.
Yeah.
And he goes around and he's knocking around the walls and he's like,
yeah. He's like, doesn't look like there's anything here.
Yeah. And so she's like, well, there's really only a couple close places that she could go. And so she moves the table and sees that there's this trap door. Mm-hmm. And so she opens the trap door and he's like, do you think you'll find a dead body down there? And she's like, I do. And he's like, okay, well, then go on down there.
Yeah.
So she climbs down. She sees a dead body. And she keeps walking. And she finds this room that has basically a humidifier, for lack of a better term, a mister that's just got this water, spraying the air. And you just see a whole bunch of cages. Yeah. And it's a bunch of different women that are all in the same, like, were they in the same clothes as the prophets?
Yeah. Yeah, they were kind of all in like this robe thing.
Okay. And she starts to try to help them. Oh, sorry. Before she goes down there, he says, you will discover the one true religion if you go down there.
Well, and what's interesting is as she's walking to the place with the cages, she goes through like these different rooms of religions, kind of like.
Yes.
I didn't catch all of them except for Satanism. I think the last door had like the upside down pentagram or whatever. Is it a pentagram or a candygram? No, a Christmas gram.
Pentagram.
What's a Christmas gram? I want one. Different movie. So yeah, and then she goes in there and she finds all of them. And is it? But yeah, she finds all of them. She tries to give one. Well, she gives one of them her coat, but they're all locked in cages. Yeah. She can't get it out. And he comes down, which is so fun. He comes down with the watering can that he was holding when he first opened the door at the beginning of the movie, which I didn't catch until this time. But yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't put that together the first time.
Oh yeah, because when he comes to the door with the watering can at the beginning, I was like, that's a random thing to be holding.
See, I thought it was just normal. Like, people water their plants all the time. Like,
yeah, but it's raining.
But inside. It's not raining inside.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's true. Yeah.
But yeah. But yeah, then she's kind of telling him about all these things. And she says, I am here because it's exactly where you wanted me to be. And he's like, bingo. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, that is such an awesome metaphor for these high demand religions where it's like, yeah, you're taught your whole life about agency, right? About choices. But when you really think about like because you talk about, that's a big thing in Mormonism is talking about like free agency and you have the right to choose and you can do whatever you want. But also like they also teach you if you don't make certain choices, then you won't basically you won't go to the best heaven, right? And so it's like
right.
My favorite analogy
and you will be shamed.
Is and you will be. And my favorite metaphor for it is like if I put a cookie in front of you and a brownie in front of you, and I can say you can take either one, it doesn't matter. But if you do take the cookie, I will shoot you in the head. At that point, do you have agency? Kind of technically, yes, but it's very forced. It's a manipulative agency.
Who's ever going to choose the cookie?
Right. And so she kind of, and I think this is, we'll talk about this a little in acting, but I think this is when she really like starts to become this really great actor. I think she did a good job the whole movie, but like she flips because she's at this moment, she's truly starting to fight for her life.
Right.
And so they're talking and he starts to get like a little creepy too. Like he's behind her, he's touching her and all this stuff. And
well, he says, do you know what the one true religion is now?
This is my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she says control.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's it.
When she said that, I was like, this is my favorite movie of all time.
And I wasn't even, I was sitting there trying to be like, what is he going with?
I for sure thought there was going to be an actual religion, or it was going to be like a church he had started or something, right? Like I thought it was, I thought it was either going to be Satanism, because that was like the last door she went through. So I was like, oh, it's Satanism. Or it was like he was going to be like, it's the Church of Mr. Reed and blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. But when she's like the only true, right? The only true religion is control. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is one of the most profound statements ever spoken in a movie or in the world. Like, it's so interesting.
It's so interesting because again, I really, really want to reiterate, we're not trying to, bash on anything or force our opinions or anything like that. But when you really look at the nitty gritty of every single religion, the more control that you have, the bigger your religion you can get, and the more that you can get people to believe, and the more crazy things that you can get out of people. Yeah. I mean, you can just take, for instance, again, I'm using this because I was grown into it, but the LDS Church, as they always talk about paying your tithing. And for those that don't know, tithing is basically you give the church 10% of your earnings, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of like a donation, it's a requirement, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of times that it's like they make it seem like it's not a requirement, it's more of just like it's the choice that you want to make. But when it comes down to it, if you don't pay that, you can't go to the temple. You can't go to the highest kingdom.
And if you don't go to the temple, you can't go to the highest kingdom. So
you can't go to the highest kingdom. Yeah. So it's that control, right?
It's the brownie and the cookie.
You don't have to pay your tithing, but if you don't pay your tithing, then you'll go to this lower kingdom, which means you can't see your family unless they want to come down and see you, because you can't go to the higher ones. The higher ones can go to the lower ones. And it's crazy. It's so crazy to think about.
and one thing going basically all the way back to the beginning is he asked them about polygamy, right? And they give this super, super classic Mormon answer of like, oh, well, they used to practice polygamy to grow the numbers of the church. And it's like, cool, you can think that if you want to, but then you go look at polygamy and you read the journals of the children that Joseph Smith married, and you realize, okay, first of all, like, these people probably were not yet capable of giving birth. Mm-hmm. And also, like, he married several people who were already married. Mm-hmm. So it's like, was it about growing the church, or was it about control?
Right,
because
exactly.
If you look at anybody else, if I replace any story about Joseph Smith with the word Warren Jeffs, any Mormon would be like, oh yeah, what a sicko. But then if you're like, actually just kidding it with Joseph Smith, they were like, oh, well, God probably told him to do it, right? Yeah. And that's where you start to see control, right? Because they're manipulating your thought by thinking, oh, well, because it's so-and-so, it's probably fine. And even if I don't understand, I'll get it in the next life. And that's kind of like the whole thing where they kind of teach you not to use critical thinking. It's so funny, actually. I think I told you this, but there's this comedian who's talking about she was raised Christian and like heavy Christian. And she was like, in Christianity, like the sins, the worst sins, like there's premarital sex, and then there's gay sex, and then there's then there's premarital gay sex, then there's gay sex, because like gay marriage is also they hate. And then she's like, then murder, and then critical thinking. And it's like that's what it is. If you get so shamed for asking questions and wanting to know the real answer for them. So this whole thing is like, it's all about control. And it's such a fascinating point, and it's so hard to agree with the psychopath in a movie, but here we are anyway. And I don't agree with him like kidnapping women, but...
Well, no, of course not. But the other cool thing when he's talking about the polygamy is that they just changed it. right? And
Yeah.
and this is another thing that has always been kind of a big thing for me too, is like, and this is again, if your belief of religion is that they're, it's a big money grab or whatever it is, a control game, whatever floats the person's boat, but they will shift as things change, right? If polygamy back then was the thing that needed to happen, why is it not any different now? They still need to grow the church. They still need to make its members even more, right? Aren't they trying to convert everybody so that they can have everybody go to the correct religion and stuff? But it's like, because that became bad later on, it's just gone, right? I mean, I didn't even know for the longest time that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. I had no idea, right? I had no idea. They don't teach you that, No. They leave those parts out, right? Because it's the bad parts. It's the parts that they don't want to talk about. But it's like that. That's not the only time that something like that has happened, where it has changed over time. And so it's like, that's where it gets very difficult and hard, because if it's true, it shouldn't matter, right? If that's what you are solely going for, is you have this belief of the afterlife and all that other kind of stuff, the other stuff doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
What you believe in is what you believe in, and that's what's going to happen for the next thousands and thousands of years, because you know that you are the one true religion, right?
Yeah.
But it changes because it will make it less popular,
Oh, it's so interesting. Should we talk about the ending?
It's so intriguing.
Yeah. Should we talk about the ending of the movie?
Yeah.
So he's being all creepy, and he says magic underwear. He's like, they're trying to control you. They control everything they do. They even control, what you wear under your clothes. What did you call them? Magic underwear? And she stabs him in the neck. Super awesome.
Looks so good.
It looks so good. One thing I noticed with
the
both
side too.
Yeah, with both with him and with Sister Barnes, which I loved, I noticed that the blood was, especially on Sister Barnes, it was coming out like in the rhythm of a heartbeat. So it was like extra accurate. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And so anyway, she's trying to escape through the house. She realizes she's not going to be able to actually escape anywhere. So she kind of just goes down to where Sister Barnes is. And I didn't love the way like this looked, because this was the one thing that I thought was a little cheesy, where she like turns around and he like slowly stabs her. Like, it was fine, but it's kind of also like, why? I don't know. Whatever. It's fine. So she's bleeding. He's been stabbed in the neck. Sister Barnes has been stabbed in the throat. Everybody's going to die, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And, I love how, and then he's like, pray for us. And she's like, prayer doesn't actually work. And she talks about the great prayer experiment where, they separate patients into who's getting prayers and who's not. And they found there's no difference. But she's like, isn't that the beautiful thing though about prayers? Like, I just do it because it makes me feel better. And it's like, cool. It's nice that you're thinking about somebody else. And I think that's true. I think,
that's very cool.
I think kind of however you want to like look at prayer, I think prayer's always, or should be, like a selfless act, even if it technically doesn't do anything. And then, he comes over and he's being creepy and she's saying a prayer and he's like getting on top of her and he's like, I don't know, he's having his final psychotic breakdown of his life.
Yeah.
He's just weird. And he's gonna stab her in the neck. And then, dude, Sister Barnes back from the dead with the foreshadowed. When that piece of wood with the 3 nails fell on the floor, I turned to Courtney and I was like, that's foreshadowing. And I knew it. I knew it was foreshadowing.
Oh yeah, you knew it had to be used.
They show it, right? She grabs it and
not only does it fall, but she like leans it up like against the wooden pillar.
And she hits him with the 3 nails just right in the side of his face and then pulls it backwards. And so he dies, and then she re-dies. And I thought that was a really cool... I love the end of this. Okay, sorry. And then Sister Barnes does end up escaping. She gets out. She finds a key, or she finds something. I don't know. She's able to get out of a window.
She's playing with the model.
Yeah.
And
she's looking at the model, and she finds a secret compartment.
A little secret compartment.
Yeah. And she gets out. She gets out through a window. She gets out, and there's... the ending's cool because you can look at it however you want. She talks about during the movie how when she like dies and comes back, she wants to come back as a butterfly so people know it's her and stuff. And then she sees a butterfly on her finger and then it disappears.
But she wants to come back as a butterfly, and she wants to land on just the finger.
Just the finger.
Right. So that's not just like a butterfly landed on him.
Yeah. So she escapes. She's outside. The butterfly lands there, and she looks at it, and then just the butterfly's gone. It doesn't fly away or anything. It just disappears. And so it's like, it's a really cool ending because, one, I think you can look at Sister Barnes coming back as however you want, right? You can look at it as she was resurrected. God let her have enough life to have this last second, or she wasn't ever fully dead, or however you want to see it. She saves Sister Paxton. And Paxton comes out. And then the ending, I think you can look at it however you want. You can think she made it out. You can think she's actually just dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because she's the butterfly.
Yeah. So it's super ambiguous. A lot of people are saying like where she ends up looks like the sacred grove. And it's just like there's all this funny...
Gosh, really?
Yeah, there's all these theories, which I like. I like that they leave it open to interpretation, but it's not like so ambiguous. We're like, what's happening at the end of the movie? It's kind of more like however you want to see it is fine.
It's like Inception.
Yeah.
I talking to Jesse afterwards, my original thought was, I thought it was Sister Barnes coming onto her hand because she had heard her talking about becoming a butterfly in the afterlife.
Dude, I hadn't even heard of that one, but I like that.
And I was like, what if it's Sister Barnes just letting her know, like, I'm okay, this is me. But then Jesse pointed out, well, why didn't the butterfly fly away, right? Why does it clip to having no more butterfly at all?
Right.
That's where he thinks it's more of it's her, and you can interpret it as she died or she lived. But there's so many different things, right? There's so many different theories, and it's kind of whatever you want to think. My only thing, and I don't know enough about the human body and its capabilities, but a long time passes from Sister Barnes passing out to her coming back. That is like,
well, and that's why I think it's kind of... Well, that's the thing is I think that's why it's kind of like you can interpret it how you want to.
Right.
Like you can also fully interpret it as it didn't actually happen at all, that Sister Paxton dies and imagines this thing kind of as she's passing through. Like there's so many ways that if you want to, you can look at it that way, That one the butterfly thing to me felt like you could interpret it how you want. I mean, obviously she could have just be dead and imagining all this stuff that's happening. But her like coming back to life to kill him felt more of like I mean, obviously it can be an interpretation, but it felt very not grounded anymore and kind of like unrealistic to me because it was like, how is she still alive after all this time? It's not like she stops bleeding. She's bleeding out even more. I know it wasn't her full neck, but like he cut her arm open, so that one was kind of, I guess I just wish maybe it had been done somewhat differently. I don't know. That's fair.
What it would have been, or maybe less seeming like she had totally died. Because she literally comes back, hits him, and then just immediately dies right after, know? So, which people have adrenaline, right? I mean, people do amazing things. They lift cars to, get their kids out of, and it's real stuff that happens, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that one, it felt a little like, it felt like the freaking brother in Get Out that you see blood pooling around his head and then all of a sudden he's still alive. And it's like, no, that's not.
Yeah, that's fair.
The thing. So, but I love the ending. Great ending. Very cool. Again, you can interpret it how you want. But yeah, it's definitely a watch to just ponder about.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those ones like Inception or I can't think of the
Interstellar.
name, but yeah, Interstellar, where it's one of those that you kind of just keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You keep going back to it.
Yeah.
So
what would you give the story? I think we just talked about the story for about 45 minutes. So
yeah, I figured that would be our longest section.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. What would you give it?
So, I mean, obviously there's a couple little tropes. You know, they go down a bunch of dark hallways a lot of the times and they never use their flashlight until they're finally going down in the cellar, which is fine. They didn't necessarily need their flashlight, but I feel like they were very smart for the most part. They made the correct decisions because what other decisions did they have? And he explains that very well in terms of the control. There really wasn't anything else that they could do. And just maybe, you know, a couple little random dumb things, but where the rest of it was so crazy, I'll do 198 because it's like everything else is like a 210, and then there's a couple things that barely break it below that 200.
I'm going to give it a 200 because the writing is so good, just of the points, the philosophical points, and just just everything. I fully admit that there are issues with it.
Yeah.
Like not even with the story really, just like a couple little beats, you know?
Yeah.
But like the rest of it's so good that those to me truly don't matter like at all. So I do have to give it the perfect 200.
Nice.
Okay, let's talk about acting.
Yeah.
So Hugh Grant,
200.
so good, 200. What's her name? Hold on, I'm missing the names. Sophie Thatcher, who played Sister Barnes, I thought was really good.
Yes.
Really good.
Yes.
Chloe
she
East,
was the better of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. Chloe East, who played Sister Paxton, I actually think I'm a little torn on her because at the beginning I'm like, oh, is she over the top? Like giddy, silly little shy, whatever type of Mormon girl. But then I was like, oh, is that so accurate though?
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
You know? And then she does a really good job when she's kind of alone
really
at the
good.
end. She did really, really, really good. So yeah. Topher Grace was not my favorite. He's whatever.
He said like 5 things though.
Exactly. And I'm like, how do you not nail those? And maybe it's the direction too, because he comes back and he goes, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. Have you received this pamphlet? And it's like, that's probably not his acting choice, but so not my favorite.
No, it's definitely
but
not.
Like everybody else was really good.
Yeah, they were really good.
So I'm like, I think I'm flirting with the 200.
Oh,
but
man.
I don't think I don't think I can give it a 200. Well, Hugh Grant is so good. I think the three of them are truly very, very, very good. I'm going to give it a 199.
Okay, I was going to do 197.
To be fully honest. So
yeah, I'll do 197. Hugh Grant easily a 200, and I would say both of the girls were very, very, very good. But I think he was still leagues above them.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have any notes for acting? I just have a few things really fast.
No.
Okay, so just a few things. At the beginning, when Hugh Grant like opens the door and starts conversing with them, I think he just did a really good job at being like creepily eager, or he's like super excited, and he just was so good through the whole thing. But getting the Hugh Grant Jar Jar impression was not on my 2024 bingo card, but I'm so glad that we got it because it was terrible and it was so funny. Like, excuse me, they mentioned Star Wars. Like, is this the best movie of all time? And then when Sister Barnes kind of goes off on him for the first time and she's like, this one's got a freaking bird head. Like that whole, and when she talks about the Holocaust and she talks about all of that stuff, she did so good in that scene.
She did
so
so good
extra,
in that
extra
scene.
props. It was really, really well done.
Yeah.
Okay. Score. Music.
So you saw this twice.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Because
Bro,
obviously
it's so good.
yeah, I mean, all of those tense moments, and there's a lot of like ticking like sounds and stuff that go through it all, which is so cool.
Yeah.
I love a good tick, a good grandfather clock, whatever kind of thing. That like that stuff like always
the
sounds
sound
really cool
design
to me for some
was
reason.
great, and listening to it in a theater and like surround sound was really awesome too. The music is really good. I paid way more attention to the music the second time, and it's like super good. It's really, really good. So I really liked it a lot.
What are you gonna give it?
196.
Okay. I'm trying to remember. I remember it being good. I'm just trying to remember like standouts.
Yeah.
This one I need to pay attention to it more.
It's hard because it's just like so much of it is like, yeah, it's supposed to be in the background. So you can forget about it, but it's like, oh, if I felt a certain way during this movie, like, wouldn't that probably have a lot to do with the music and the sound? Like, but then you don't know because you weren't thinking about it, right? So it's tough.
You weren't thinking about it, and I've always had the impression of, oh, if the score didn't leave me with a huge impression, then it wasn't super great, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously not super great, but just okay. And so I'm going out of this, and I'm like, the only thing I remember is the ticking and just intense music, but is it generic intense music that I can find on the internet, or is it like there is somebody with a freaking orchestra or something making like super intense, awesome, good music type of thing?
Yeah.
So I remember being good though. So I'll still do a 185 because I know it was good. It's so hard. It's so hard to be like, nothing stood out. So is that on me or is that on the movie?
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's background noise. It's not necessarily supposed to be popping in your ears. But if I felt tense the whole time, yes, a good amount of that's going to be acting, but the other is going to be score.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, vibe.
Vibey.
What you got? 2.
20.
Craig's giving it a 20. Very interesting
20.
score. I am also going to give it a 20.
Yeah.
Plus 180.
I'm going to give it 20
Is
plus.
it 200 for me?
I'm going to give it 20 plus 160 plus 5 plus.
Oh, gosh. Make it stop.
18 plus 2.
Okay. Good for you. Man, I'm not going to beat a dead horse on how just intellectually interesting this movie is, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
So big recommend on the watch for sure.
Okay. Ooh.
Okay, what do you think you gave it? Mine's easy. I gave it a 9.95. I know that. I think. Did I?
9. 981.
Oh, Craig. 980.
979. Dang it.
Wow, you can't guess just right on it? You just got to go one above and one below?
Oh.
Okay, well, it was great. Let's talk about box office predictions. Okay, so it opened to 11 million.
Okay.
What do you think? I think I got my number.
So
500 million.
limited
Just kidding.
2 billion. Is the limited release limited, and is it going to become global? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay. Open to 11.
I think
Okay.
I got my answer. You have yours?
Yes.
Okay, ready? I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 74 million.
55.
Okay, we're kind of close on this one. 55. Craig says $55, you guys.
$55, bro.
Okay, what are we sitting at right now? Heretic.
Hereditary.
Also, the title of this movie is interesting too, because I'm like, is he the heretic? You know,
I guess.
it's just interesting.
$10 million budget.
Yeah. It's at 26 right now.
Okay.
So,
Oh, pretty small international.
yeah. Yep.
But it's not released in a lot of places.
No, it's not. I do wonder if it will release in more places. But I think it'll keep. I think this is going to be a word of mouth movie.
It
So
definitely is.
The more, because it's already, because it's been out for, I think it's only been out for 2 weekends. So I think its second weekend was better than its first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Wow. Okay. Heretic will be available to stream on HBO Max starting November 25th. Dang.
oh, wow, really?
Dang.
Oh,
I could
so
be able
this
to see
isn't gonna-
movie so quick.
This isn't going to be, I mean, the box office isn't going to go up like at all. Maybe a little bit.
it probably still will.
Yeah. Huh.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I guess we will see what happens with that.
Either way, it's done. It exceeded expectations across the board.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And people are really liking it. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess we'll see.
Did we hit 2 hours? Oh, we're almost. We're going to barely be short of 2 hours on this bad
Nice.
boy. Daddy's got to go to bed. I would like to leave
Yeah.
everybody with 2 thoughts. Okay. One is from the movie where Mr. Reed asks, how do you know that it's true? And she says, we know it's true because of how we make it feel. My recommendation to people is do not confuse belief with knowledge. That's my one thing. And then the second thing that I wanted to say was an interesting quote that I heard today, which I liked, which is religion is following the path of someone else, and spirituality is following your own path. So those are my 2 thoughts for this.
Wow.
You got anything else?
No.
Is it my
Is
turn?
it you? I think
Yeah,
so.
okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's episodes of Religions.
I was going to say,
Eating-
you got to say religion.
It has to be. Religions eating all critical thinking. If only nobody thinks. I make estrogen. I couldn't figure out what to say.
Man, you had
I
that
don't-
so good for a minute
Oh,
there.
it was so good. Sorry, everybody. Sorry about it. I'm so sorry to women. Actually, I do make estrogen. I think all men make some estrogen, right?
Right. I think so.
Yeah. I hope so, or else we're going to have a talk. Okay, well, join us next week for Wicked, right?
I think so.
Okay, well, Craig thinks so, but I'm going to go see it tomorrow, on Thursday. I'm going to go see it yesterday from when you listen to this.
You're going to go see it. So it'll either be next week's episode or it won't be next week's episode.
Yeah, so take that and shove it. Okay. Dang, it's late. I gotta go to bed. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
You're all amazing.